Hello, everyone, and welcome to Petworking, a podcast focused on pet care and animal health. I'm Peter Kenseth, Vice President at Maya Strategy Group, and I am very excited to dive into our episode today because it concerns a topic near and dear to my heart and features one of my oldest friends. Really happy today to be joined by Andrew Stickney, technology professional and childhood friend since we were 6 years old. Andrew is not on today to talk to us about his professional life, but is on to talk about dog adoption, which is something, like I said, I'm very passionate about because Peony was a rescue herself. But more specifically, Andrew's here today to talk about senior dog adoption. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to Petworking.
Thanks for having me. It's exciting.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you're here. It's not every day you get to do a podcast episode with somebody you've known for over 30 years. So
not every day I get to be on a podcast that I've watched. So that's pretty cool too.
Good. Well, hopefully someday this will be a nice item you can add to your resume. Andrew, I know we started talking about this back at Global Pet, but you at that point in time were telling me you'd just come back from Colombia. Andrew is also a very avid traveler and kitesurfer, but had just come back from a kitesurfing trip in Colombia. And you were mentioning to me that you were in the process of adopting a dog that you found as a stray in Colombia. Can you tell me a little bit about that dog and a little bit more about your passion for senior dogs in general, because, in the time I've known you, that has always been something that's been near and dear to your heart.
Yeah, I'd love to. So I've kind of always gravitated toward rescuing senior dogs, adult or senior dogs. They're a bit harder to adopt out of a shelter, or they tend to have a bit of a harder time coming out of the shelter, but they are extraordinary as pets, companions, members of the family. They usually know the drill. They understand a lot of the rules of the house. There's very little training that I've needed to do with my senior dogs. I've had a senior Bernese Mountain Dog that I rescued, a senior Irish Wolfhound that I've rescued, and a senior miniature Dachshund who's been rescued, and now Roxy, who's the dog from Colombia. So I'm happy to share more about that as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's such an important thing. And, I remember Slinky fondly. I remember Finney. I think you had moved from Vermont by the time you got your Dachshund. So I have not had a chance to meet them yet, but was really excited to hear about Roxy. But, I just wanted to call attention, to the fact that like these senior dogs, when we think about shelter animals, just in the US, not even on a worldwide basis, the ASPCA notes that about 3.3 million dogs enter U.S. shelters every year, and 670,000 of them are euthanized. And senior dogs are a big portion of that, because they have health issues, because people don't want to deal with the burden of rehoming a senior dog and potentially inheriting negative behaviors. But like you said, a lot of it is people just want a clean canvas, a fresh slate. They want the joy of raising a puppy, but it doesn't mean that senior dogs are any less worthy candidates for adoption. They're just not the most popular. And so there are a lot of great organizations out there that focus on ensuring that senior dogs have a great home to spend the last years of their life. And really, when we think about dogs as members of the family, isn't that what we want, for any of our family members is to live out their remaining years, being well cared for and being happy.
Yeah. And that's really been my policy with them. It's quality over quantity. So it's a no heroics on the health side, but absolutely amazing golden years, amazing quality of life for them. And they have been, honestly, it'd be really hard for me to go back to a puppy because the investment in training a dog is huge. Whereas adopting a senior dog, like I said, they usually know the drill. They understand so much and they can come in from day one and just be an amazing member of the family. And they really need the adoption as well. So I've always loved doing that.
Yeah, I think it's super cool. And you know, I know you've done this, is like you said, this has been a passion project of yours, you know, for a long time, is making sure that you know, senior dogs have good homes. And I think you've done this, you know, ever since you lost your childhood dog, you know, 15 years ago. When Disney passed away, right? And but out of all these stories, Roxy absolutely takes the cake. And I'm really excited for you to tell people about this, because it's just an amazing story. So you were kite surfing in Colombia and you found Roxy. Tell us more.
So if you start in Cartagena, Colombia, and you go east, you get to Barranquilla, and you go east further, you get to Santa Marta. If you go east just a short 6 more hours, you get to a place called Cabo de la Vela, which is a amazing kite surfing destination, but an arid desert. And got there to go kite surfing and met a stray dog on the beach who's now named Roxy. And she very unfortunately was struggling badly. There not much access to water, fresh water. It's on the ocean, but not much access to fresh water, and really very limited resources in terms of food out there. And so she was starving, and she was severely dehydrated, had lost most of her hair due to mange. And there were other stray dogs, but dogs that were somewhat cared for by the community a little bit and younger. She was a senior dog, and in that environment didn't have much longer to live. So said to myself, she is in Eden. So I gave her some food and gave her some water, and tend to carry those things around when I've been in places that have a lot of stray population. And as I got to know her, I realized she just wanted to be pet and have love. And it was such a heartwarming moment, and it caused me to take a step back and say, like, if I walk by this dog that I can help, I can do something to help her. If I walk by and just go about my day and just go kite surfing, that really is not the person I want to be. And she clearly needs help. So made the decision that I was gonna do something to help her. And even though it was this one dog, and there are loads of strays, there was something about her that I just connected with. And so put her in the car, and drove back to Barranquilla, which is where I was staying at the time, and said, I'm going to figure it out. Met with a hospital called Unimed, who has been just an amazing partner in all of this, that I couldn't ask for anyone better. And this is how it went. I went into Unimed and got out my phone and Google Translate and started typing what the need was and what the situation was for this dog. And their staff was so loving and so willing to just hack through the Google Translate of what I was trying to ask for and what this would look like and how we would care for her, and ultimately how she could potentially be adoptable again. And we started the process of just caring for her and bringing her back to health. And so when I got to Barranquilla, it's a long drive to get from Cabo de la Vela to Barranquilla, and got there around 10 o'clock at night. The vets took her in and started doing the exam and started running the blood work and started putting her on fluids, just to get her back to a steady state. And over the next couple of weeks, while I was still in Colombia and she was in the hospital recovering, we started to discuss her treatment plan, but also how we get her ultimately back to the US and go through that process. So I'm happy to go through any of that. But I'm really happy to say, and I couldn't be more excited about this, and I'm not going to wait for you to ask. I just last week got the approval from the CDC in the US to bring her back to the US. So it's, and I've booked my ticket. So she's going to be flying home with me on June 1st. So.
Wow. Now I was going to ask, she is coming. You mentioned the CDC. What were the other legal loopholes, barriers? I've heard bits and pieces of the story. I know you mentioned there was a particular influencer down in Colombia that was really instrumental in helping you through the process. You alluded to Unimed. It's a pretty significant undertaking.
it was not a small feat. I mean, it's a whole, what this gave me insight into is what a dog rescue does every single day. And they do yeoman's work doing all these things I learned how to do on my, in a foreign country. They do all of that day in and day out, and they get really good at it. But it is a lot of effort. There was one influencer who will share, I guess, in the show notes, who is instrumental in helping us figure out how to get Roxy into a clinic, and that the clinics that would take a dog and help nurse them back to health. I mean, this is something that vets do all the time, but there are some clinics who are more used to dogs who are going to ultimately end up going to another country, that sort of thing. But really the approach was get her to a place where she could travel, where she could get into adoption again. And that was a process of initially getting her stable, starting to get cleaned up, starting to take care of the mites and some of the issues, the skin issues that she had, the food and water and the consistency there. And her body took care of a lot of it, but there were vaccinations and treatments and medicines and vitamins that all needed to be given in order just to get her to a place that we could even consider bringing her back.
And from the regulatory perspective with the CDC and things like that, what were you looking at there? What were the check marks that you had to hit?
So you have to do, initially you have to do the vaccination schedule, specifically rabies, that the US requires for dogs to be imported into the US. And so the first thing that had to happen was that rabies vaccination. With a dog from a high-risk country, which Colombia is considered a high-risk country per the CDC, you then then need to ship out a serology titer to a US lab and there's very few that are approved to do this work, but that they will then, what they're testing for is that the rabies vaccination you gave has had the appropriate immune response in the dog, and that it has, in effect, it's been effective. That process takes a couple of months, is significant expense. They ship that back to the lab, which will then give you all the back to the animal hospital, which will then give you the paperwork you need to then go to the CDC and gain conditional approval to import the dog. So the process took about 4 months or so. Just to get to a rabies vaccine and some of those things, she needed to be in better health than she was when we pulled her off the beach.
And you had her in a clinic down there at Unimed the entire time?
At Unimed the entire time. Yeah, they've been amazing partners.
And you've been paying for that care?
Yes.
And the boarding. Yep. Now, I have to ask, what has all of this cost you from a financial perspective? Obviously, I know things are cheaper in Colombia than they are in the US, but 4 months of boarding anywhere has to cost something.
Yeah, so it is a lot less expensive in Colombia. That the US dollar goes quite a ways there, on everything from the treatments to food to medicines and so on. So they're really not. It really is not comparable to doing this in America, but it actually has been relatively on par. If we don't include the flights that I'm about to take, it was actually on par with adopting a dog out of a rescue group. And so somewhere, we'll see what ends up being, but somewhere between $600 and $1,000 US.
Okay, yeah, and I think and that's. Maybe on the low end, you might be able to find, an adoption fee for like $350 or $400, or some organizations will waive an adoption fee for you. There are a lot of pet food companies out there that sponsor adoptions and will cover the adoption fees for you. But, relatively, $600 to $1,000 to bring what it sounds like a dog that you have an amazing connection with into your family, and to save and change a dog's life, that's huge. And, and when we think about some of the other things that go into that, I'm sure you had to test for heartworm, you had to probably Lyme disease and any other tick-borne illnesses, things like that. So, there's a lot that goes into it. And so, when you see an adoption fee on a dog, it's there for a reason, and it's there because the shelter or the organization that, you know, has gone through the work of making sure that dog is ready to be adopted has had to invest that time and that expense into doing that. It's not, you know.
I think that that's really well put. It can seem really high that an agency would, you know, has these fees, but having now gone through the process, it's an extraordinary bargain. And that, never mind the dogs who actually need a really expensive procedure when they end up in a shelter. Roxy didn't, so got lucky there, I guess. But there are dogs who, you know, end up in a shelter and then need some really expensive surgery or need some really expensive treatments. And it blends across all these dogs and these fees. What I would say is that I wouldn't look the same at a rescue fee ever again. I think it's an incredible value.
Absolutely. No, I mean, I think it's huge, right? When, you know, when you think about, you know, that there are groups that do this at a large scale. When we were at Global Pet, there was, you know, an organization there that had a litter of puppies from the Cayman Islands, and, you know, there were 6 dogs, and I think it was either a minimal adoption fee or they were waiving the adoption fee on them, but they were spayed, neutered, you know, they'd had all their shots. And if you think about, you know, just taking the time and effort on your own to do all those things, that's a significant savings right there. And then you would have to also pay for those services. And there is such kindness that, you know, throughout the system that goes into making sure that those fees can be kept low, right? And you don't want them too low, because you don't want you want to make sure that they have a good home to go to. And but, you know, there's also a need for people to adopt these dogs, as we've talked about.
Yeah.
I think it's so needed. And, you know, and I will also say you know, I know you have focused on, you know, very senior dogs, more towards the end of their life, than the beginning, you know, 8 years and older. You know, I think in the case of your Irish Wolfhound, because they only lived to an average of 8 years, Finney was 5 when you adopted him. But even with Peony, she was between 2 and 3 when we adopted her, and she was found as a stray and spent a month in a shelter in South Carolina, and then was sponsored to come up to Vermont so that she could avoid being euthanized down in the shelters in South Carolina. But even after coming to Vermont, she spent 3 weeks in a shelter up here. We met her at an adoption awareness event at PetSmart. It was the first day that we were out looking for a dog, but we were told she'd been in the shelter for 3 weeks up here. And your focus on senior dogs was a big part of the reason why, you know, we felt good about adopting her. We heard, you know, her story, and it resonated with me, you know, and your experience and passion for adopting senior dogs. And, you know, she's far from a senior, but really, once you get beyond that, like, puppy stage, there is a marked decline in interest. And also, interestingly, with Peony, I wasn't aware of it, but I have heard anecdotally since adopting her that Black dogs have a harder time being adopted out of shelters because they don't photograph as well. And so it's tough to get them to look cute in pictures and things like that. So, you know, that's another population that you can maybe pay a little bit of extra attention to, but there's lots of pets out there that need good homes.
Yeah.
So, Andrew, I know you volunteer with a local shelter now. You know, you're doing what you can to contribute. I know you've done a lot of fostering, focused on senior dog adoptions. Any recommendations you could make for people?
So I think within your local community, there's always opportunities to give. And if you can't have a dog, then I think it makes a ton of sense to donate a little bit to the shelter that is doing the work. It helps them continue to do that work and continue to pull dogs out of not great situations, whether it's off the street or off, in this case, the beach, or off of, or just helping a family who needs to rehome their dog for some unfortunate reasons do that.
I think the old adage, charity begins at home, really goes a long way in that regard. And you can really see the firsthand, you know, impact of your contributions if you're donating to local shelters. There's the Gray Muzzle Organization, Old Dog Haven, the Senior Dogs Project, the Gray Muzzle Cottage, the Silver Muzzle Cottage. There are so many advancements in pet nutrition and animal health that are targeted towards senior dogs. In our first episode, we featured Leap Years, which is focused on giving, quality of life to older dogs by boosting, their NAD levels and restoring that vitality and youthfulness to them in their later years. So maybe once you get Roxy back here, you can get her on some Leap Years. I can reach out to Nick and Ginny and see if maybe we can get her on the compassionate use program. Seems like she has had a rough go of it down there.
She is it's like she's made a full recovery, so she's looking really good.
When was the last time you saw her?
I left Colombia in end of January, and so
Okay.
I get photos all the time and videos of her. So the last video I got was 2 days ago, which I'll send over to you as well. But it turns out she does seem to really enjoy baths, which might be unique for her, for dogs in general. But she seems to be pretty chuffed about bath time. So
you'll have to get her one of those bath stations that we saw at Global Pet with the that'll talk to you like Arnold Schwarzenegger or whatever voice you want it to do.
Exactly.
I thought that was a pretty interesting innovation, or at least become good friends with your local pet washing station.
It's true.
So cool. Well, Andrew, thanks so much for taking the time. I think this is a really cool story. Obviously this is more on the nonprofit and charitable side of things than necessarily the business side of pet care and animal health. But, these are the types of stories that, really make everything that you do on the business side worthwhile, because, they're just heartwarming and, it makes me really happy to know, personally know people like you who are out there doing this good work and ensuring that dogs like Roxy are able to live out their remaining years in peace and comfort. And it's such an important humanitarian mission because at the end of the day, dogs just want to be loved and they want to be close to people. And for the most part, no matter what has happened to them in their lives, they have this incredible capacity to forgive and maintain that desire for human love and companionship. You saw it with Roxy on the beach. I've seen it with Peony. She was also found as a stray in South Carolina, but they just want love. We don't know fully what their lives were beforehand, but for every dog that lives its life with the same family and grows from a puppy to a senior in the comfort of the same home, surrounded by the same people, there's so many senior dogs that grow old and live out their final years in shelters, or are euthanized because they were abandoned, because their family had to surrender or rehome them for whatever reason, or because they got lost and became a stray. But given dogs boundless capacity to love and all that they do for us as humans, I think it's the least we can do to try to make sure that as many senior dogs as possible are able to spend their golden years surrounded by love and care. And I don't think I'm alone. If you look at the industry, if you look at pet care and animal health, there are so many advancements in pet nutrition and animal health that are targeted towards senior dogs, from specialized diets to supplements like Leap Years, to blood panels that are specifically formulated to ensure that your dog ages healthfully. We could spend an entire episode talking about products for senior dog and senior animal care for that matter. And maybe that's a good idea. We could do that in the near future. But the industry knows that people want to honor the lifetime commitment they've made to their dogs by ensuring that their golden years are enjoyable as possible. And I'll just close by saying, along the way, let's not forget the senior dogs who weren't as lucky to live their entire lives with the same family, but are still every bit as deserving of that love and care. So Andrew, thanks so much for joining us. And thanks to everyone for listening. I'm Peter Kenseth, and this has been another episode of Petworking. We'll see you again soon.